Good evening and welcome to the June 11, 2008 Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Here.
Chair Abkarian.
Here. Next item, please.
Reading of the minutes.
Reading of the minutes of the meeting of May 28, 2008. Do we have any motion?
Move to approve, dispense from reading.
Second. Roll call.
Motion and a second. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Abkarian.
Yes. Oral communication is the next item. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker limited to 5 minutes. Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decisions. I do have one card from Mario Marchman. Is this for any item relating to any item that we're discussing today, or is this just an item?
For item number 7.
Okay, so we'll just hold this back until that time, if you don't mind. Anyone else for oral communications? Hearing none. What's next?
Recruitment Examination Status Report.
Sorry?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the recruitment examination status report is provided for your perusal. The report shows the recruitments that are currently being worked on by each of the members of staff. If you have any questions on this report, happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Sir Scantus?
Mr. Doyle, do we have, I don't see any recruitment for librarian. Are we still on an acting librarian?
Yes, we are.
And we're not recruiting for a librarian?
Not at the moment.
Do we have any other acting executives?
No. We anticipate a decision being made on whether to pursue a recruitment on the Director of Libraries very soon, though.
Okay.
What do the rules say about having someone just stay as an acting librarian? For how long could they do that? Just indefinitely?
The appointments can be made, I think there's a limit, according to the rules, for up to 6 months that can be renewed with approval of the Director of Human Resources. There used to be a part of that, or I think it was a proposal to have that come before the Commission, but that wasn't adopted in the last set of the rule amendments.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, what's next?
Eligible list established.
Bill?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, list before you are the eligibility lists that have been established since our last meeting. Approximately 2 weeks ago. As you can see, there are a total of 10 lists that have been established in a variety of different departments. We have some open, some promotional, and some promotional and open recruitments. The list does contain the total number of applications, and then the far right column indicates the total number of candidates who made it onto the eligibility list for each of those processes. If you have any questions on those, I'd be happy to answer them. And my staff is here as well.
Any questions? What's next?
Class specification for approval, power plant operator series.
Bill?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a revision of an existing class specification for the power plant operator series. This is class specification that was last updated in 1992, so it's been quite a while. There have been many changes in the operations of the power plant, mostly having to do with some of the technical side, the equipment that's used, the chemicals that are used. As an example, we're no longer using fuel oil in the plant. So a lot of minor adjustments have been made throughout the course of this specification, but no real wholesale changes to minimum requirements or anything along those lines. We do have staff here to answer any questions. Ms. Klein, the HR analyst from Water and Power, as well as John Escudero, who's a supervisor from the power plant, in case you have questions.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes. What's this next item?
Report on the use of outside hearing officers.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a report that the Commission had asked for a few months ago regarding the use of outside hearing officers on our disciplinary appeal hearings. As you know, both the Charter and Civil Service rules do authorize the use of outside hearing officers for our civil service appeal hearings. This has never been done or has not been done in recent memory. However, there are occasions where the topic has come up, particularly when we have a lot of hearings going on, and we had a peak period of hearings, I believe it was last year, where there were about 6 going on at various stages, and as you well know, that does create a bit of a workload for the commissioners, all of you who are volunteers, and we certainly appreciate that. So the concept of using outside hearing officer does get kicked around in such times. Currently, as you know, there are just 2 hearings occurring, so we don't have the amount of workload that we've had at various times in the past. But nevertheless, it's something worth discussing. The staff report puts together a process for considering this, and I want to make sure the Commission has full input and full discussion on this. But just a few notes. The selection of an outside hearing officer, I believe, can be easily incorporated into our existing disciplinary appeal hearing procedures and policies. I think right about the time where the hearing is being set up, as far as who's selecting which members of the Commission will be appointed to that particular panel, they could be made at that time. The one challenge to this is that under the Charter, a commission appeal hearing is supposed to commence within 2 weeks upon receipt of an appeal. And I think in that circumstance, what we would have to do is sort of set tentative dates unless arrangements are made ahead of time to select an outside hearing officer. We're not necessarily going to know that person's availability, but nevertheless, I think with all the parties here, we could at least set some tentative dates and proceed from that standpoint. The report talks about the qualification and selection of hearing officers, and our recommendation would be to select individuals with an appropriate background, either in law, employment law, human resources, someone with experience in arbitration or mediation, and even perhaps past civil service commissioners would be a good pool to choose from. I did identify a couple examples out that are being used currently. A big prominent example would be our neighbors in the Los Angeles County, which utilizes hearing officers. Of course, they're a much larger organization. They have disciplinary appeal hearings going on constantly, and what they have is a pool of regular hearing officers. They pay them, they work during the day, they do their hearings, they go through them relatively fast. In a matter of 3-4 days, the whole thing is done. They come up with their findings, recommendations. Those recommendations do go to the Civil Service Commission. However, it is the majority of the work as far as running the hearing is handled by those individual hearing officers. As I understand it, they are not assigned counsel, but they are assigned court reporters in the course of those hearings. They're paid currently $950 per day for their services. Another option to consider is the use of arbitrators. There's a state agency, the State Mediation and Conciliation Service. I contacted them in the course of doing some research on this proposal, and I know that they provide mediators for labor relations issues. If you're in labor negotiations and you hit impasse, they will provide as a free service mediators to help resolve those types of scenarios. They also handle the assignment of arbitrators for civil service appeal hearings and such. Those individuals to charge a fee, and it's usually based on what their professional charges are. Some of them are attorneys, some of them are just plain mediators, and that rate can range anywhere from, as I put, $650 a day to up to $1,200 per day. The problem with arbitrators is that these are professionals. They really have no tie or connection to the organization, which is why my recommendation would be not to go that direction, because you have some people with little interest, little accountability to the organization. Our preference would be people with a tie to the Glendale community, prominent citizens, people such as yourself who live here or work here and would be willing to do this. With that, I want to kind of open it to the commission, see what their preference would be. A few challenges. One I already mentioned had to do with the 2-week requirement to commence a hearing. That might create a challenge when you don't know who that individual is going to be as the hearing officer ahead of time. The other issue, which I address in the report, is the cost. We're currently not budgeted for this, assuming we would pay the individual. Anyway, those are just some of the options and some of the things for you to consider. So with that, I'll leave it up to the commission for discussion.
Thank you. Before we take any, let me just have Mario Marchman add a statement. Let's hear what he has to say, then we'll take comments from the commission.
And Mr. Chair, while Mario's coming up here, I do want to let you know that I informed all of the Employee Association presidents about this topic discussion, if they wanted to have some input on this, since it does affect them.
Okay. Please state your name.
Thank you. My name is Sergeant Mario Marchman. I'm employed at the Glendale Police Department, and I'm also the president of the Glendale Police Officers Association. So, Chair Abakarian and commissioners, I want to take a few moments as the president of GPOA to comment on the use of outside hearing officers. And I've got a very short statement here. First off, let me say that I know many of you personally. I've been employed for over 30 years with the city, and I've been the president for a number of years. I've been on the association on and off for over 25 years. And I know many of you. I know that all of you are dedicated and hardworking, and I appreciate, as do the individuals at the GPOA, represents your hard work and dedication. That being said, there's been a situation recently with Civil Service Commission, a hearing, and again, I think the Civil Service did an outstanding job. I know it wasn't easy, but there was some sort of after story with that troubles the GPOA, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm here to speak about utilizing outside hearing officers for the Civil Service hearings. It's the position of the GPOA board that outside hearing officers be used in all hearings. Though this is contrary to past practice, and as Matt stated, it's never been done, I believe recent events have changed the effectiveness of the Civil Service Commission. Recently, one of our members was subjected to disciplinary action, very severe as a matter of fact, by the police department, and that person chose to use the civil service process. During this long and costly proceeding, the Civil Service Commission heard hundreds of hours of testimony, expert opinions, and numerous legal arguments from both employee and the city's attorneys. After approximately 9 months, and at the conclusion of many hours of deliberations, the Civil Service Commission rendered a decision in favor of the employee. Though the employee received very severe discipline, he still retained his job. The employee returned to work in the police department, as well as the employee moved forward. Shortly thereafter, after the Commission's finding, one of the Civil Service Commissioners was not reinstated to his position on the Commission, and the employee's case was taken to Superior Court, which is clearly allowed by the City Charter, though the City Council was urged to allow the matter to stand on the Civil Service Commission's decision to stand as it was. This manipulation and involvement of the civil service process by the City Council has created a situation where the members of the Glendale Police Officers Association do not feel they will receive a fair hearing, or if they do receive a fair hearing, The decision of the commission would be rendered invalid by the city council for political reasons. The Civil Service Commission was created to allow employees to obtain fair and impartial hearings on matters of discipline. Recent events have unfortunately proved this case no longer exists. If the basic function of the Civil Service Commission is no longer fair, impartial, and independent process, free of political involvement, then the men and women of the Glendale Police Officers Association requested an impartial third-party hearing officer be employed. Take these comments very seriously. The Board of Directors spoke at length about this issue, and we have on numerous occasions. I was, in this particular matter, I was present for much of the hearing. Two of the current commissioners were there. In fact, the full commission was on that particular matter. And I know how hard they deliberated. I know how hard they worked, and I know this wasn't an easy case for anybody involved. So I don't take this lightly. That being said, unfortunately, it's our feeling that the Civil Service Commission, for all their hard work, was sort of nullified by the end result. And we feel that, as I said earlier, that the process has been politicized. It gives our members a very uneasy feeling when they have to appear before the Civil Service Commission. So that primarily for that reason, and for some of the reasons Matt articulated, for the very fact that some of these hearing officers don't have any connection to Glendale. They aren't connected with that. They're not politically beholden to anybody in Glendale. They're able to render a decision which we feel might be fair for the employee. So that's our position, and we wanted to make that statement tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You have a question from Mr. Marshall?
No, I have a statement.
Okay, well, why don't we take the statements after Mr. Marshall leaves?
Oh,
I have a question.
From Mr. Marshall?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I completely understand your point, but one question that I do have, just as a clarification for me, if we utilize an outside hearing officer, how does that stop the city council still going and doing what they did on a similar case?
Assuming they did that.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, it's our opinion that as far as manipulation of the Civil Service Commission, not reappointing someone for political reasons, would cease to be an option if it was an outside hearing officer, that alone. And as I said, certainly we're aware that City Council has the ability and jurisdiction to take these matters, your decisions, and basically take them to the next level, Superior Court. In this particular matter, that was recommended against doing that by a number of individuals present, but they decided to go forward anyway. I don't think that we'd be able to change that.
I see.
Question from Mr. Marshall?
Yes. Following up on Mr. Mnuchin's question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doyle, under the proposed use of outside hearing officers, the commission would still be involved, wouldn't they? In other words, the hearing officer would have the hearing, make the recommendation to the commission, and it's actually the commission would still be involved in making the recommendation, and would be the commission's decision again to be appealed to council if that was not appealed. It can't be appealed to council, but
Right.
council would then look at the commission and take their report. So again, following up on Mr. Mnuchin's question, knowing that the commission would still be involved, how would that make a difference as far as your organization is concerned?
As I stated earlier, I hope you understand, the Glendale Police Officers Association doesn't have a problem with the Civil Service Commission. I appreciate your hard work. I appreciate your function. You were put in place. This system has been in for many, many years for the very reason that it should be above the political gerrymandering that sometimes occurs in this city. And I think you've done a great job in separating those. And so it's not our fear that the commission would have the final say, but we think by removing it one step to this hearing officer who would render his decision, and then the commission could certainly make their ruling on that, it just adds another layer that hopefully someone for political reasons wouldn't be able to manipulate that decision or force their will on the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Comments?
I still have a couple questions. I'm sorry.
From Mr. Marshall?
No, I'm sorry. My question is basically going back to our charter. How does at least from I know I'm not an attorney, but my reading of the charter, is my understanding this commission was established to make sure that our employees receive a fair hearing. And based on, I'd like to hear what my colleagues' opinion is based on what the charter has to say for this whole process.
We turn to our attorney in reference to that, I'm assuming. Braden?
Yes, the charter provides that the commissioner or an authorized representative may conduct hearings.
Okay.
So
Could you repeat that?
the charter provides that the commission or authorized hearing conducts disciplinary hearings. Authorized representative.
Okay, I think maybe my question was misunderstood. My point was, what is the intent of the charter as far as this whole process of the hearing? I understand we have the right to do that, but how do we ensure that the employee gets an, I don't know if I'm putting
A fair hearing?
I mean, I understand your point, but I think, you guys understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
May I comment on
Yeah.
that?
Let me go with Mr. Coleman, then we'll go with you. Mr. Coleman?
Well, I very well might be putting myself right on the line here, but I was a hearing officer for the Labor Commissioner of the State of California for a number of years. I was on this commission for 4 years. I was not reappointed, and then 10 months later, all of a sudden was reappointed. I had nothing to do with the particular hearing that Sergeant Marchman is discussing. But I will say this. I have a very good friend that's on the city council, and our friendship has lost something because I simply don't talk to him more than maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. The city council member that appointed me to a second term, I've met once in passing, and I've never spoken to him. And if there's anybody on the city council that doesn't like the way I rule in a particular disciplinary hearing, I could care less whether or not I was removed or not reappointed or simply not assigned any more hearings. I don't have a political agenda. As a civil service commissioner, I call them as I see them.
Can I say
And I
that?
can only speak for myself, but I know these guys up here. I've worked with them for close to 5 years, and I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but they are a trustworthy group of individuals, and they call them as they see them, and that's exactly what I do. And Sergeant Marchman, I have all the respect in the world for you, and I truly do. But I think that I think your association needs to relook this. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Ms. Cantus?
Well, the question, thank you, Mr. Chairman Abkarian. God, it's a foreign word to say, Chairman Abkarian.
After 2 years, this is what
After 2
happens.
years, it's tough. It's hard for me to keep quiet, I'll tell you that. I think the question that Commissioner Manukian posed was, how do we ensure a fair and impartial hearing? And that is ensured in the city charter, because our decisions are not appealed to the city council, as Sergeant Marchman quite rightly pointed out. We can't control if the city council wants to take something to the Superior Court, and there's nothing that he can do, I can do, the charter can do, anybody can do. So that was the level, if you will, that was put in to ensure that all decisions are done outside of the political arena. Sergeant Marchman is referring to the fact there was one commissioner that was not reappointed. There were various thoughts as to why that happened. There's never been any proof that it happened in that regard. And indeed, the person appointed to replace that individual is Commissioner Coleman, who just indeed has spoken to you currently. There's nothing. The charter allows the city council to appoint whom they wish, on the Civil Service Commission. That's the only control that they have. Were they to exercise it in that regard, there's little or nothing you can do because it's at their discretion. As Commissioner Devine pointed out, and quite rightly pointed out, regardless of whether we have outside hearing officers or not, the final decision is going to be in front of these 5 commissioners. As Sergeant Marchman knows, I was one of the commissioners on the hearing that he's referring to. And you did accurately indicate the length of the deliberations, both at the hearing panel level as well as at the Civil Service Commission. I think the idea and I know the idea of the hearing officers came up at my behest because we were overloaded. And it's unfair. In some instances, I think this week we have 3 hearings. Next week I know we have 3 hearings and 1 Saturday scheduled. Okay? Let me tell you that you start getting into 3 and 4 hearings, and I was there as well. You're working from sometimes 4 nights a week, and after working a full-time job. And no one's complaining, but at some point you say, you know what, we need to consider these outside hearing officers. And the purpose of this is to set up a process. Whether we've never used it before. But I think we would be foolhardy not to have such a process in place in the event we're overloaded again, and in order to ensure, indeed, that there is a complete hearing and a fast hearing. One of the points that Matt has made is that we can have these during the day because we're going to be paying somebody, and we can get through them very, very quickly. Let me tell you, when going through some of these hearings, when you're starting to coordinate 3 and 4 calendars and 3 commissioners on a hearing panel, your delays become pretty bad, and as Sergeant Marchman quite rightly pointed out, you get into a hearing and that could be another 9-month process. It's unfair to the employee. It's unfair to the panel. Having said that, it's our job to do these hearings, but it's not our job to kill ourselves or kill our families to do that. And I think what we need to do is put this process in place. And not saying we're going to do it. It's certainly something we have to vote on to do. And I would suggest, Matt, that in the experience level of it, the civil service, the county civil service commission requires a 5-year experience, and I think we should parrot their requirement on experience. And as you know, Matt, and maybe the others don't know, I am a county civil service commission hearing officer. And indeed,
hire you.
Yeah, I can't. I'm a civil service commissioner. Most of this information came from me, and that's exactly what happens on there. As far as I know, all of the hearings are conducted that way. I know there are special commissioners, Sergeant Marchman, that are assigned to the ALADs, the sheriff's hearings that are not necessarily of the other group, but they're the same type of thing. I haven't done an ALADs hearing, so I can't say. I know its length, but my guess is it would be longer than a non-ALADS hearing. I've done non-sheriff's hearings, and we're done sometimes in a day. We're done in a day. We don't go through all the objections. A lot of them, there's not necessarily lawyers on both sides. They're advocates for the employee. Sometimes the county for the appointing authority has an advocate, and you just don't have the same degree of complications that Chairman Abkarian was one of the first, and I know Commissioner Coleman as well, was saying we need to make these things shorter and more simple so that the employee gets their rights in court. I'm here to tell you I've had those hearings, and the employee does have their rights heard because it's done very, very quickly. It's then submitted to the Civil Service Commission, who makes we make a recommendation as a hearing officer, they make the final decision. I think that's important that we establish the process, that we get names listed. My concern is the money on this, because I think if we're going to do that, if we feel we have the money, because if we have to go to the City Council, that could be problematic with the City Council says, well, wait a minute, no, you need to do that, and in a vacuum, and that somehow I think we need to address that issue so that we don't necessarily have to go to the City Council. But I do think we need to have that process in effect.
Anyone else? So before I say a few things. This is hard for me, too, not to speak and wait until everyone has spoken. First of all, Sergeant Marchman, I appreciate you bringing that up. I think somebody needed to say that, and you did, your board did, and I appreciate that. I think it's something that City Council needs to understand that whatever political issues there are, Civil Service Commission shouldn't be a part of it. Hopefully we're never part of it. Some people say you get appointed because you're politically active. It's possible. But God knows that I've gotten more heartache because I'm sitting here than I was if I wasn't sitting here. I promise you that.
Sorry. I'll second that.
Now third is.
The problems and issues that come up for civil service commissioners.
Hold it.
I know the situation that came up. I've talked about it right here in the Civil Service Commission. The person who wasn't reappointed was Mike Haney. Let's be honest about it. Let's not play these games that sometimes gets played in this chambers here. Mike Haney was not appointed because Mike Haney did the right thing, and Mike Haney will, again, knowing that he will not be appointed, again will do the right thing. I'll promise you that everyone sitting next to me, and I haven't really talked to them, but I'll promise you they'll do the right thing again if they don't have to be reappointed. And that's what's good about the Civil Service Commission, that we will do the right thing regardless of the political consequences, because no one in here, God knows, is putting their name into running for city council or anything else. So we really don't have any grudge. We don't have any voting issues. We don't have any of those headaches. We go to our families, and trust me, maybe city council would like to flatter themselves, and I really do appreciate what they do, but if I don't have this position, it really will not make that much of a difference in my life, in my family's life, except that I want to give something back to the community. That's the only reason we do this. And if tomorrow I'm given a case again, Sergeant Marshman, and I have to make the same exact decision with the same set of facts, knowing that the next day I will not be reappointed, I'll promise you and your board and to the employee association and everyone else that I will make the same exact decision I did before without any hesitation, 1 second. And I will promise you that everyone sitting in this side will do the exact same thing without any consideration. My problem with hearing officers is, one, that the city attorney has to pay them at some point. And if you ever believe that position becomes political, wait till somebody actually has to pay them. If we have to pay them, we have to get it approved by the city council. When an arbitrator or a mediator knows that they're getting paid by a particular source, I'll promise you that the decisions are going to be skewed. Because if they don't actually make the right decisions and don't say the right things, they are not going to get hired the second time. If the decision about that police officer was done by an arbitrator, that arbitrator will never, ever be hired by the Glendale Police Department. I promise you that. And that's why I think it's very, very important that we would have a Civil Service Commission that's not beholden to anyone, that doesn't care about reappointments or non-reappointments, but will do the right thing time and time and time again, regardless of the decisions. In reference to the appeals, the same way that the appellant has the right to appeal the decision, so does the city council. That's the only checks and balances that they have on the Civil Service Commission. That's the only right that they have against the Civil Service Commission. We might be wrong on a particular issue with all due intentions, and they have a right to appeal that decision regardless of what we do. And that right is theirs. Do I believe that they did the right thing? I personally believe that they were wrong. I believe that our decision was 100% right, but I was one of the people who voted in favor. So, but again, it's the right that the city council has to make sure that there are checks and balances, that the Civil Service Commission, without the right to appeal to them, does not just on their own do something without any facts to support it. I personally am not in favor of setting process in which we hire outside officers. I think it's wrong. From day one, I've always told people who actually wanted to apply for the job, saying that this is not like other commissions. There are times in a month that you put in 30 hours, 40 hours in that month just listening to hearings. But there's been times where 6-7 months have passed where we haven't had any hearings either. So you come to this job, you understand the requirements of sitting on this chair. You better know that it's going to take you a lot of hours. And I think everyone in here understands that's what they're here to do. And that's the reason that I am not in favor of even putting a process, because the minute we put a process, we start using it, and the effectiveness of the Civil Service Commission goes away, and the and the power of others who pay for the arbitrators will take over. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form in favor of turning this Civil Service Commission into an outside counsel, paid outside counsel processes, in which I don't even believe if anyone had to pay an arbitrator to do this, we would run over budget without a doubt. There's no question about it. So that's my 2 cents, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
So are you saying we're not going to get paid for this?
You are. The chocolate right in front of you is the payment.
Then you lied to me.
Yes, exactly. Mr. Braden?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just one point of clarification. This would not be paid from the city attorney's budget. We don't have any money to pay outside arbitrators.
And I'm sure if I ask the police, they'll say the same thing. And I'm sure if the parties decided that they really need to get this done in one day and the parties want to pay for it themselves, maybe we'll reconsider our position. But I really believe that we should not put the decisions that should be made by the Civil Service Commission in the hands of an outside party who at the end will give us a report that we have to rely on and just vote on. Trust me, there won't be enough time for us to go and review back what he or she has done, and it would be just a travesty. I really don't think that we should do that, but that's my 2 cents.
I have a
Yes.
quick question, just following up what you were saying. So I understand this process. Let's say if we did establish a process of hiring an outside hearing officer, after that person does the hearing, then they're going to report back to us, and we have to go through. Can we elaborate? I mean, I don't.
Let me comment on that, please.
Go ahead.
What the process would be, and it was done in the Los Angeles County Civil Service Commission, is the hearing it comes to the Civil Service Commission. If we choose to, if the body chooses, not one person, the body chooses, it would be sent to an outside. It could be sent to an outside hearing officer who would conduct the evidentiary hearing and prepare findings of fact and conclusions of law. Typically, those would include what the findings of fact. In other words, if it's alleged that Sam Manoukian took a chocolate candy from the podium, there would be a hearing on that, and there would be a finding of fact that indeed he did this because.
So he is going to render a decision?
No, he's findings of fact and conclusions of law that are recommended to this body to make the final determination. The hearing officer cannot make the final determination.
Then we have
it's left to this body.
Then we have to go through the process of the transcripts and...
You don't have to. You can, but you don't have to.
make a ruling if you...
You basically take his recommendation as the final recommendation, not question it, and basically rubber stamp anything he says. That's basically what it turns out to be at the end, guys. And it is so not the process that the employees would want. Listen, it's so much easier for me to go home and not do these things, trust me. But I'm promising the associations, the employee association, the fire, the police, that this is the fairest way to handle it. And you bring an outside officer to do the hearing, they're going to be beholding to the people who pay them, and we not going to be able to go back and read over the evidence again. We just have to just agree with what they say. Sometimes we might question one or two items, but 90% of the time we just basically say thank you, rubber stamp it, and leave. At least if a civil service commissioner is involved in a hearing, they go back and they have all the information that they need, and that's something that we can do. But anyways, I think we've all made a comment. I think we all have discussed this issue. Is there a motion to... I'm sorry, Mr.
Well, I was going to move to note and file a report.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was going to move to note and file the report.
Note and file the report. Second?
Second.
Okay.
Can I be heard, please?
Yes.
It floors me that all we're asking to do is put a process in place. If we ever needed a hearing officer, we don't have a process, we don't have a list. We don't know when that's going to happen. We've had in the past commissioners, and I've sat for 2 years as chairman, that have indicated that they can't be on a particular hearing. I don't know how many hearings we're going to have. And let me tell you from experience, when you're doing 3 hearings in a row at once, this is a big strain. And I'm not saying that I would ever vote for an outside. I'm not saying that, but I think we should at least have a process in place so if we need to do it, we've got a list of people that we're ready to go to. Again, it requires, I think, to just note and file the report is advocating our obligation to be sure that there is a process in place in case it's needed. I'm not saying, my God, Albert, as you know, Commissioner Abkarian, the last person not to do his job is myself, because I've been on probably 12 hearings since I've been on the Civil Service Commission, including 3 at one time. So I'm not advocating using hearing officers, but there becomes a point, if that comes and you have you have commissioners that aren't going to be able to do it, we will not have a process in place. And I think we owe it to ourselves to at least have the process in place in order to, if it's necessary. I'm not advocating doing it, but I think we ought to have the process. We have a motion and a second, however.
Do we need a roll call for that? Yes. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
No.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes. What's next on the agenda?
Agenda forecast.
Still?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is the forecast of our upcoming meetings. Our next meeting on June 25th, there will be a hearing following that, and so we'll be trying to have a short meeting. I do need to notify you that we will be having a reinstatement request heard in closed session. That's the only thing I'm aware of at this point. This involves a police officer. On July the 9th, we are anticipating having the report on the fire department hiring procedures. And then on July the 23rd, we'll get back into our report on advertising budget expenditures, both the quarterly report, and by that date, we should also have hopefully some full numbers for the entire fiscal year of 07-08. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's what we're looking at for the next few meetings.
Any questions? What's next?
Reports and information and past due employee performance evaluations.
Mr. Coleman.
We're dealing here with the issue of past performance evaluations, and the report reads as follows. City Clerk's Office, no past dues. City Treasurer's Office, no past dues. Development Services, no past dues. Fire Department, with 240 salaried employees, no past dues. Glendale Water and Power, with 379 salaried employees, no past dues. Human Resources, no past dues. Planning, no past dues. Police, with 378 salaried employees, no past dues. Public Works, with 316 employees, no past dues. Out of a grand total of 1,808 employees, we only have 22 first notices and only 5 second notices and no third notices.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great job. What's next?
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Any comments from anyone? Any announcements? Yes,
Mr. Chair, I've been asked by some of our folks from the fire department to extend an invitation to the commission to attend one of our fire academies that's currently going on. We have a group of candidates currently going through the fire academy as recruits, and they've given us 3 days in a couple of weeks, June 23rd, 24th, and 25th, to which they'd like to extend the invitation for any of the commissioners to come and watch for a little while. Their suggestion is to come first thing in the morning. That's when a lot of the activities are going on, and a lot of the real physical work. They try to do that very, very early in the morning, and stay for an hour or so to see what is actually done in the academy. So if individual commissioners want to get back to me, if they could attend, and we would be talking about Monday, June 23rd, Tuesday, June 24th, or Wednesday, June 25th. Their recommendation is 0720, which I think means 7:20 in the morning. And again, they recommending stick around for maybe an hour or so. On one of those days, was discussing this with Mr. Braden previously. If a quorum happens to want to go at the same time, we would be faced with a Brown Act situation where we'd have to post that as a public meeting. So if those of you are interested in going, we'd have to try and keep you in groups of 2 or less. So if you could let me know if you'd like to attend.
Could somebody also email that information to us with the date and the times and everything else, so we know where it is?
I will.
What time we have to wake up to get there at 7:20 in the morning?
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? What's next?
Closed session.
Okay, any items in the closed session? No items?
Move to adjourn.
You're adjourned.